My cousin complained that I didn't invite her to my wedding. She showed up at the reception anyway, demanding a seat. I just smiled and said, "You're not on the guest list." The look on her face when the bouncer told her to leave was priceless. My wedding was supposed to be one of the happiest days of my life. It had taken months of planning, countless meetings with vendors, and endless discussions with my fiancé, David, to get everything just right. We had dreamed of this day for years, and now it was finally here. A beautiful venue by the lake, soft lighting, elegant floral arrangements, and a carefully curated guest list. Everything was set. I wanted this to be perfect, and for the most part it was. But there was one thing I hadn't anticipated, something that would throw everything off course and change the entire mood of the evening. My cousin Clara. She wasn't someone I thought about often. Growing up, we were close, but as we both got older, our paths diverged. I went on to university, built my career, and settled down with David. Clara, on the other hand, seemed to get lost in a cycle of drama and attention-seeking behavior. Her life, always a whirlwind of questionable decisions, never seemed to be as put together as mine. There was always some issue, a new romantic disaster, a financial crisis, or another strange job she was doing that no one quite understood. I'd kept my distance over the years, and it wasn't out of spite. I simply didn't have the energy to deal with her chaos anymore. But somehow, Clara still found her way into my life, albeit through the occasional phone call or random family event. I always tried to be polite, but I had no interest in bringing her into my world anymore. So when the wedding invitations were sent out, she wasn't on the list. There was no animosity behind it. It wasn't a personal decision. I just didn't think we were close enough anymore to warrant an invite. And honestly, I didn't want her presence at my wedding to be a distraction. That day was about David and me, and it needed to be perfect. The first sign that something was wrong came a week before the wedding. Clara texted me. It was a simple message, just a few words. "I noticed I didn't get an invitation to your wedding. What's up with that?" I took a deep breath, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. I knew this wasn't going to go over well, but I had to be honest. "Clara, I'm sorry, but we kept the guest list small. It was a tough decision, but we only invited close family and friends. I hope you understand." I thought that would be the end of it. I expected her to either ignore it or send a half-hearted response saying she understood. But Clara didn't take rejection well. She replied almost immediately. "Well, this is nice. The one thing I've looked forward to is seeing my family at your wedding, and you leave me out. I'm your cousin, for God's sake. It's not like I'm a stranger." I paused before responding, knowing any further conversation would only escalate things. I tried to remain calm. "I really am sorry, Clara. Please don't take it personally. I just had to make tough choices for the guest list." But she wasn't done yet. The next few days were filled with passive-aggressive texts and calls from her, each one more desperate and entitled than the last. She made it clear she was angry, but she also insisted she would be attending anyway, whether invited or not. I had hoped she would take the hint, but clearly, Clara had no intention of staying away. Her insistence was becoming more than just annoying. It was starting to feel like she was determined to cause a scene. I tried to ignore her and focus on the final preparations for the wedding. I couldn't let her ruin the one day I had dreamed about since I was a little girl. But deep down, I knew that Clara was going to show up regardless of what I said. I just didn't expect what happened next. The day of the wedding arrived. The sun was shining, the guests were arriving, and everything was falling into place. David and I had our moment before the ceremony, stealing a quick kiss before walking down the aisle. I had never been happier in my life. The vows were exchanged, the ceremony went off without a hitch, and the reception was a beautiful celebration of love and joy. It felt magical, just as I had hoped. I was surrounded by close friends, family members who truly mattered, and everyone seemed to be enjoying themselves. The band was playing, the food was being served, and there was a general air of happiness that made the entire room feel alive. I was finally able to relax and let go, knowing that my new life was beginning. It was everything I had wanted. But then at the height of the reception, as I was laughing with some of my best friends near the bar, I noticed a commotion near the entrance. I wasn't sure at first what was going on, but as I turned around, I saw Clara. She was standing at the door, arguing with the security guards. Her face was red and she was raising her voice, demanding to be let inside. My heart sank. It took me a moment to process what was happening. Clara had shown up, uninvited, and now she was making a scene in front of everyone. I felt a rush of anger and embarrassment flood through me. I had known she might do something like this, but to see it happening in front of all my guests was humiliating. I had worked so hard to create a beautiful, stress-free day, and now Clara was determined to ruin it. I watched her stand there, demanding a seat at the reception, arguing with the bouncers, who were doing their best to keep the situation under control. I could feel everyone's eyes on me, and I knew I had to make a decision. I couldn't let Clara take over the moment. This day was too important to let her hijack it. I walked toward the entrance, my heels clicking against the marble floor as I approached the scene. Clara was still shouting, trying to push her way past the guards. "Clara," I said, my voice steady but sharp. She stopped mid-sentence, turning to face me, a look of complete surprise on her face. "What's the big deal?" she demanded. "I'm your family, I'm your cousin. Let me in." I took a deep breath, my eyes locking with hers. "Clara, you're not on the guest list. I've told you already. You're not invited to this wedding." The look on her face was priceless, a mixture of disbelief and rage. I could see her mind racing, trying to process the words that were coming out of my mouth. I stood firm, refusing to back down. This was my day, and I wasn't going to let her ruin it. Before she could respond, I turned to one of the security guards who had been standing nearby. "Please escort her off the premises," I said, my voice calm but final. Clara's jaw dropped and I could see the color drain from her face. "What? You can't do this," she screamed. "You can't just kick me out. I'm family. I have a right to be here." The security guard stepped forward, gently but firmly taking hold of Clara's arm. "Ma'am, please, you need to leave." Clara pulled away, but it was no use. The guards were already escorting her toward the door, and the entire reception had stopped to watch. I felt a pang of guilt. I knew I should have been more compassionate, but I couldn't ignore what she had done. She had disrespected my decision, my day, and my marriage. The look on Clara's face as she was led out of the building was one of pure shock and humiliation. She hadn't expected this, but I wasn't going to let her turn my wedding into a spectacle. As much as I had once cared about her, I couldn't allow her to make my special day about herself. I turned back to the room, the noise and laughter slowly returning as the situation was diffused. I walked back to my seat, feeling a strange sense of relief wash over me. It was over. Clara was gone, and the focus was back on what mattered: my wedding, my new life, and the future David and I would share. But the evening wasn't quite finished yet. As the band played and the guests continued to dance, I couldn't help but smile, knowing that while Clara may have tried to disrupt everything, I had stood my ground. I had taken control of the situation, and the day was mine to enjoy, untainted by her drama. The look on her face when the bouncers threw her out was the perfect end to what had been a truly unforgettable wedding. After Clara's dramatic exit, the wedding continued, but the atmosphere had undeniably shifted. The sound of laughter and conversation slowly resumed, but I could still feel the tension in the air. It wasn't just the shock of Clara's uninvited appearance that lingered. It was the fact that I had had to make a choice that I knew was necessary for my peace of mind and my future, but one that also carried consequences. David, my new husband, had witnessed the whole incident. He had been standing off to the side when it happened, talking to his friends, but he had seen Clara's outburst and the way I had handled it. I could tell by the look on his face that he was proud of how I stood up for our day, but there was also a hint of concern. I hadn't been the one to tell him about Clara's potential involvement in my wedding, and he knew there was more to the story than what had happened in the past few minutes. When I finally rejoined him at the table, he pulled me into his arms, offering me a brief but comforting hug. "You okay?" he asked softly, his eyes scanning my face for any sign of distress. I smiled, grateful for his support, but I couldn't help feeling a little conflicted. "I'm fine now. I wasn't expecting that. You know how Clara can be, but I didn't think she'd actually do something like this." David nodded, his expression hardening slightly. "You handled it well, but you don't need to apologize for her behavior. This is your day, and nobody gets to take that away from you." I smiled again, feeling a little more at ease in his arms. "I know, I never thought she'd make a scene. I didn't want to have to deal with her today, but then I guess I should have known." David leaned in and kissed my forehead, offering me a moment of peace before we rejoined the guests. The rest of the evening passed in a haze. The speeches were heartfelt, the dinner was delicious, and the dance floor was full of energy, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The image of Clara's shocked expression as she was escorted out of the venue kept replaying in my mind. I had made the right call, I knew that, but I couldn't stop thinking about the fallout that might come next. She wasn't the type to let something like this slide, and I had no doubt that she would find a way to retaliate. The next morning, I woke up to a series of text messages from family members, all reacting to the incident in their own way. Some were sympathetic, others were neutral, but a few of them were downright passive-aggressive. It was clear that Clara wasn't going to let this go quietly. I read through her texts first, dreading what I would find. As expected, they were a mixture of blame and disbelief. "Clara, I can't believe you did this to me. You humiliated me in front of your guests. I'm your family, and you treated me like an outsider. Clara, I guess I wasn't invited to the wedding because I wasn't good enough for you, huh? Just wait, I'll make sure everyone knows how you treated me. You'll regret this." I couldn't help but feel a sense of dread as I read her words. She was always dramatic, but this was something else entirely. I knew she had a tendency to blow things out of proportion, but her threats made me uneasy. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself before responding. I didn't want to get dragged into an argument with her, but I also couldn't just let her accuse me of things that weren't true. I typed out a quick response, trying to keep my tone as neutral as possible. "Me, Clara, I don't want to argue. I told you ahead of time that the guest list was small. I didn't want to cause drama, but you chose to make a scene. That's not my fault. Please respect my decision and move on." I hit send and quickly set my phone down, not wanting to keep checking it every few seconds. The last thing I needed was more drama. But as the day wore on, I began to get more and more messages from family members, from friends, all asking what had happened, some even questioning whether I had overreacted. I tried to stay calm, replying to each person as briefly as I could, but each message felt like a little more weight on my shoulders. It wasn't just Clara that I had to worry about now, it was the entire family. She had a way of spinning things to make herself the victim, and I knew that her version of events would start to spread. I couldn't just sit back and let her manipulate everyone into thinking I was the bad guy. But what could I do? The more I thought about it, the more I realized I didn't want to explain myself to anyone. This was my wedding day. I had made the right decision, and I wouldn't apologize for it. That evening, as David and I sat on the couch, I finally broke down and told him everything. How Clara had bombarded me with texts and messages, how the entire family was now involved. I could feel my chest tightening with frustration and anxiety. "I just don't know how to make it stop," I admitted, wiping my eyes. "I've been as patient as I can with her, but she keeps crossing the line. I don't know what to do anymore." David pulled me closer, his arms wrapping around me in a comforting embrace. "You've done everything you can," he said, his voice soft but firm. "You don't owe Clara or anyone else an explanation. You're not responsible for her actions. We've got our own lives to focus on now." I nodded against his chest, feeling the weight of his words sinking in. Maybe he was right. Maybe I didn't need to keep defending myself or keep justifying my choices to everyone. Maybe it was time to let Clara and the rest of the family deal with their own problems. I had my marriage to focus on, and that was all that mattered now. The next few days were quieter, but the tension still lingered. Clara continued to bombard me with angry messages, but I refused to engage. The family began to take sides. Some stood by me, others sided with Clara, and a few simply didn't know what to think. But I didn't care. I had made my decision, and I wasn't going to back down. Then, a week after the wedding, I received an unexpected message from my aunt, Clara's mother. The text was short but blunt. "Aunt Linda, Clara says you kicked her out of your wedding. She's devastated. I need you to apologize for what happened." I sat there, staring at the message, trying to keep my emotions in check. The nerve of Clara to manipulate her own mother into pressuring me. I knew this was coming. She'd already been trying to paint me as the villain. It was no surprise that she was now attempting to rally the rest of the family to her side. I took a deep breath, trying to compose myself. I didn't want to escalate things further, but I couldn't let my aunt twist the narrative. I quickly typed out my response. "Me, Aunt Linda, I didn't kick Clara out. She showed up uninvited, and when she caused a scene, I had to ask her to leave. She's responsible for her actions, not me. I'm sorry she's upset, but I can't apologize for enforcing boundaries." I hit send and immediately regretted it. I didn't want to get into another back and forth, but at the same time, I wasn't going to let Clara manipulate the situation any longer. Within minutes, Aunt Linda replied, "Aunt Linda, I hope you understand how hurt Clara is. I just want to make sure this doesn't cause a rift in the family. I don't think you understand how far she'll take this." I let out a frustrated sigh. I knew where this was going. Clara had already started spreading her version of events, and now it was a matter of damage control. But I didn't want to be caught in the middle of this. I was tired of defending myself. I had made my decision, and Clara needed to face the consequences of her actions. The days following Aunt Linda's text were filled with a growing sense of unease. Clara's manipulation of the situation was starting to reach its peak. She wasn't content with simply being excluded from my wedding. Now, she was intent on turning the entire family against me. The more I tried to move forward with my life, the more Clara's drama lingered like a dark cloud hovering above us, threatening to ruin everything. Every time I thought it was over, she found a new way to escalate things. It wasn't just the texts anymore. Clara had begun sending mass messages, carefully crafted to paint me as the villain. She posted on social media, making cryptic references to being excluded by family members and humiliated by a cousin who couldn't even bother to send a real invitation. She had made it clear that she was going to make everyone feel guilty for what had happened, turning herself into the victim and me into the one who had wronged her. What irritated me the most was how she had started spreading lies about me. The worst part, she wasn't even telling the full story. She hadn't shared the fact that she had shown up uninvited, demanding a seat, making a scene in front of everyone. No, in Clara's version, she was simply an innocent bystander who had been cruelly rejected for no reason. And now, it seemed like half the family believed her. Aunt Linda wasn't the only one reaching out. My mom, usually calm and understanding, had started calling me every day to talk about Clara's situation. She was trying to stay neutral, but her concern for Clara was obvious. "Sarah, you have to understand, Clara's been through a lot in her life," Mom said one evening. "You know she can be a little dramatic, but she's still family. You shouldn't have treated her that way." My fingers clenched the phone as I listened. "Mom, I didn't treat her any way. She showed up uninvited, and when I asked her to leave, she threw a tantrum. I wasn't going to let her disrupt my wedding." "I know, but—" "No, Mom," I interrupted. "It's not just about the wedding. This is about boundaries. Clara doesn't respect anyone's boundaries, and I'm done making excuses for her. I can't keep enabling this behavior." I could hear Mom sigh on the other end. "I get it, but this is family, Sarah. I don't want to see things get worse." Things were already worse. It wasn't just the immediate aftermath of the wedding, the ripple effects were spreading. Clara had turned my wedding, the one day that was supposed to be about David and me, into a public spectacle. The longer I tried to avoid the situation, the worse it became. But despite the chaos, I knew I couldn't back down. I had made the right decision. I'd kept my guest list small for a reason, and I had to enforce that. It wasn't just about Clara's tantrum. It was about standing up for my own choices and protecting my peace. A few days after my phone call with Mom, I received a message from one of my closest cousins, Emily. Emily and I had always been close, and I hoped she would see things from my perspective. But as I read her message, I could feel my stomach drop. Emily, hey Sarah. I know things are tense right now, but you really hurt Clara. She's been crying for days. I don't think you realize how much she's suffering. She's family, and you should have handled this differently. I sat there for a long time, reading and rereading Emily's message. Was this really happening? Why were they all siding with Clara? How could they see her as the victim when it was her actions that had caused the rift? I couldn't understand it. I took a deep breath and typed a response, trying to keep my emotions in check. Me, Emily, I know you care about Clara, but I'm not responsible for her actions. She showed up uninvited and caused a scene at my wedding. I can't keep making excuses for her behavior. I'm sorry if you think I handled things poorly, but I had to protect my day. I hope you can understand that. I hit send and immediately regretted it. Was this the right approach? Was I pushing away the people who mattered most? I didn't want to be caught in the middle of a family feud, but it felt like everyone was demanding that I apologize for something that wasn't my fault. I didn't owe Clara an apology. I had done nothing wrong. The response from Emily came much quicker than I expected. Emily, I understand that you were upset, but you can't just cut Clara out of the family like that. She's been through so much, and she just wants to feel like she belongs. This could have been handled better. I closed my eyes, feeling a rush of frustration. Clara wasn't the only one who had gone through hard times. We all had our struggles, our issues. But that didn't mean we had the right to treat others poorly, especially not at such a significant moment. I wasn't just standing up for myself. I was standing up for my own right to set boundaries and protect my peace. I wasn't about to let Clara's selfish behavior control my life, but it seemed like that was exactly what was happening. The more I resisted, the harder my family seemed to push. The more I tried to hold my ground, the more Clara manipulated the situation to her advantage. The breaking point came when Clara made a public post on social media. I had known it was only a matter of time before she aired the drama for the world to see. It wasn't enough that she was spreading lies to the family. Now, she was determined to make me look like the villain to everyone. In the post, Clara shared a long, heartfelt message about how family should always come first, and how she had been disrespected and humiliated by the actions of a heartless cousin who couldn't even acknowledge her worth. She included photos from my wedding, blurry, unflattering shots of the reception, with her standing in the background looking upset. It was designed to make me look bad, to make it seem like I had rejected her for no reason. The caption, as expected, was full of her playing the victim. She even had the audacity to tag me in the post, making sure I saw it. I stood there in shock, staring at my phone as the likes and comments rolled in. Some people expressed their sympathy, others shared their confusion. But the one comment that stood out the most was from Aunt Linda, who had been pressuring me to apologize for days. Aunt Linda, I can't believe you did this to Clara. I know she's not perfect, but she's family. Sarah, you need to make things right. The frustration bubbled up inside me like a volcano ready to erupt. Clara had made my private family drama public. She had dragged me through the mud in front of people who didn't know the full story. She had manipulated everyone around her, and now I was the one being painted as the villain. That was it. This was the final straw. I didn't respond to Aunt Linda's comment or anyone else. I wasn't going to get dragged into a battle of words. I didn't owe Clara or anyone else an explanation anymore. I had done my best to be respectful, but Clara wasn't going to stop until she had ruined everything. And for that reason, I had to do something about it once and for all. I made a phone call that night, one that would change everything. I contacted a lawyer. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of legal proceedings. I had had enough. I was done being manipulated. Clara had crossed a line, and now she was going to face the consequences of her actions. I wasn't going to let her ruin my wedding memories, my reputation, or my peace any longer. The legal team I hired sent Clara a cease and desist letter, ordering her to stop slandering me and making false claims. They also made it clear that any further defamation would result in a lawsuit. Clara didn't take this well, but it sent a message loud and clear. I wasn't going to let her control my life any longer. The situation didn't resolve immediately, but over time, the family began to understand. Clara's antics were no longer the center of attention, and the truth began to emerge. My relationship with my family was strained, but with time, they came to see that I had done what was necessary to protect myself. It wasn't an easy road, but it was one that I had to take. The day I took a stand against Clara was the day I regained control of my life. I had learned that standing up for myself wasn't selfish. It was necessary for my own well-being. I wasn't just protecting my wedding day, I was protecting my future. The days that followed the cease and desist letter were anything but peaceful. Clara had always been good at causing drama, but now she had pushed me to a point where I could no longer turn a blind eye. It wasn't just about the wedding anymore. It had become about Clara's continuous attempts to destroy my life, manipulate my family, and twist the narrative to fit her victim complex. What she didn't realize was that I wasn't the naive cousin she could walk all over anymore. I had my own life, my own boundaries, and I would defend them no matter what. Despite the legal notice, Clara didn't back down. If anything, she escalated her efforts to get attention. She sent more public messages, wrote long posts on social media about how she was the black sheep of the family, how no one cared about her, and how no one wanted her to be happy. It was always the same narrative. Clara was the misunderstood one, and I was the villain who had wronged her. But something started to shift. The more Clara played the victim, the more I realized I couldn't stay quiet anymore. I had let her manipulate me for far too long, and now she had involved the entire family in her game. She had pushed me to the point where I could no longer pretend I was okay with her lies. No more passive-aggressive responses. No more backing down. I had a conversation with David late one night, after another one of Clara's posts had gone viral among the family group chats. "I'm done," I said, my voice low but firm. "I'm done letting her manipulate me. I don't care if she's family anymore. I've tried to handle this with grace, but she's crossed the line. She's made this into something bigger than it should have been, and I won't let her win." David looked at me with a mixture of concern and admiration. "I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself," he said, "but you need to be careful. You know how dangerous Clara can be when she's backed into a corner." "I'm not scared of her anymore," I replied, determination hardening my words. "I've already been patient, but now I'm taking control. I'm not going to let her ruin everything I've worked so hard for." David sighed, his face softening as he took my hand. "Just don't let this tear you apart, okay? You've got so much to lose, and I don't want to see her drag you down any further." "I won't let her," I said, squeezing his hand. "But it's time to put an end to this. She's going to face the consequences of her actions. It's time." The next step was clear. I had to confront Clara directly. I had tried to ignore her and play by the rules, but this was no longer just about my wedding or a few family arguments. It was about my integrity, my boundaries, and my right to live my life without being constantly harassed by someone who didn't know how to respect anyone else. The moment finally came a few weeks later. I had kept my distance from Clara, but I had made the decision to meet her face to face. I wanted to settle this once and for all, to finally make her understand the damage she had caused, and to let her know that there would be no more room for her manipulation in my life. I arranged to meet Clara at a local cafe, a neutral place where we could sit down and talk without interference. The plan was simple. I was going to tell her exactly how I felt and put an end to her campaign of lies. No more running, no more pretending. When I arrived, Clara was already sitting at a table, her arms crossed, looking defiant. The moment she saw me, she smirked, the same smug expression I had come to know so well. She clearly thought this meeting was going to be another opportunity for her to talk circles around me, to play the victim and make me feel guilty for kicking her out of the wedding. I took a deep breath as I sat down across from her. This was it. This was where everything would change. "Clara," I began, keeping my voice calm but firm. "I've had enough of your games. I'm done letting you manipulate the situation and turn the entire family against me. You made a scene at my wedding and you've been spreading lies ever since. I don't care if you're my cousin. I'm not going to let you do this anymore." Clara raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised by my directness. "Oh, so now you think you can talk to me like that?" she sneered. "You really think you're in the right here, don't you?" "I do," I said, my voice unwavering. "I was justified in asking you to leave my wedding. You showed up uninvited, you caused a scene, and then you tried to ruin the entire day with your drama. You've been harassing me and my family ever since, and I've had enough." Clara's face twisted with indignation. "You don't get it, do you? I'm your family, Sarah. Family means something. You don't just get to throw me away like I'm nothing. And now you want to pretend like you're the one who's in control. Please." I took a deep breath, leaning forward. "You've turned everything into a battle, Clara. I tried to be patient, I tried to keep the peace, but you've forced me into a corner. I've had enough of your constant need for attention. It's not about family to you. It's about controlling everyone around you to get what you want." Clara stared at me, her eyes narrowed. "You're so full of yourself. You think you're some perfect little angel, don't you? You've been acting like I'm the only one who's made mistakes. But you know what? You're no better than me. You've been pretending, acting like your life is perfect, when really, you're just as messed up as the rest of us." I blinked, momentarily taken aback. "What are you talking about?" I asked, genuinely confused. Clara's lips curled into a bitter smile. "I know about you, Sarah. I know what you've been hiding. The perfect life you've built with David, the image you've carefully crafted. It's all a lie, isn't it?" My heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" I whispered, a sense of dread creeping up my spine. "Oh, I know all about your little secrets," Clara continued, her voice low and dangerous. "The lies you've been keeping, the things you've been hiding from everyone. You're not as perfect as you want everyone to think, and now you've got the nerve to lecture me about boundaries." I stared at her, my stomach churning. What was she talking about? What did she know? "You've been pretending for so long, Sarah," she sneered, "but I see through it. You're not better than me. You've just been lucky enough to hide your mess." I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping across the floor. "This is ridiculous," I spat. "You're grasping at straws, Clara. You're trying to drag me down because you can't handle the fact that I've moved on. You can't stand that I have a life, a marriage, and a future. So now you're making up lies to make yourself feel better. I'm done with this." Clara stood up too, her face flushed with rage. "You think you can just throw me away? Fine, but you're not going to get away with this. You'll regret it. I'll make sure of it." I walked away from the table without looking back, my heart pounding in my chest. Clara's words hung in the air, but I didn't care. I wasn't going to let her intimidate me anymore. This was my life, my marriage, and I wasn't going to let her or anyone else tear it down.